Okay, so the intervals we're going to, I'm going to start with the C major key, which again we haven't defined, but it's basically the white keys. So we're going to start, the first interval is from the first white key to second, that's C to D, right? That's a major second. And then from the first to third white key, that's a major third, and C to F, it's a major fourth, major fifth, major sixth, a major seventh, and then that's an octave. Okay, so those are your basic intervals of a Western major scale. And they have different names. So the second, third, sixth, and seventh are considered major because they're from the major scale. The fourth and fifth are considered perfect. I'm not sure where that perfect exactly comes from, but they are actually in both the major and minor scale. And then the octave is just the distance from any note to the next note up of the same note. And then you can flatten and sharpen. You can reduce or increase the pitch of each one to get the minor or diminished intervals. So if you have the second, third, sixth, or seventh, if it was a major, now it's a minor. If it's a fourth or fifth, if you diminish it, or if you lower it by 1/2 step, it's diminished. If you raise it by 1/2 step, it's augmented. You don't really talk about raising the other ones because if you raise a major second, that's the same as a minor third. So you don't talk about an increased one. You talk about the minor third. So to play that, that's a minor second, also a 1/2 step. We didn't really talk about that. That wasn't in my original chart. So what's an F flat? E. Yeah. It basically means flat F by 1/2 step, which in this case is E. But when you write stuff out, you can't have a key that includes like E flat and E. So you have to say F flat. This is one of these crazy music rules that's always existed. You can't have the same note be flat and that on the same key because you gotta write on the same line. So they just flat the F, and it's really E. Okay, and then that is a flat fifth. That is Diablos in Musica. That's the interval that'll get you killed in the Middle Ages. Also very popular in heavy metal. It's also interesting, like halfway through an octave, if you go from the root to the flat fifth to the octave, the flat fifth is right in the middle of the two. That's also called the tritone. Look up tritone on Wikipedia, lots of history, fun stuff. It's a minor sixth, minor seventh, and then you really don't have a minor octave or anything like that. So, those are the intervals. We're going to use it. Those get there. Okay, now key signature is what I talked about. Kind of alluded to it, said that was the key of C major. You can have, different keys have different notes in them. And this makes a little more sense when we consider just and equal harmony. But right now, basically a key is determined, the major scale is determined by the key. So your starting point determines what notes are in your key. Okay, so starting on C, you get all the white keys. If you start on A, you get 3 black keys. It has to do with intervals, and we'll see that. So the way they describe it is they're showing key signatures, and the key signatures are shown by sharps or flats at the beginning of the piece. So there are basically 15 given key signatures. C means no sharps or flats, and then we'll get to the other signatures that have different amounts of sharp or flats. No signature has sharps and flats. Okay? Not to say you can't have a piece of music that has sharps and flats in it. You can use accidentals, but the key can't have that. And then there are fixed order. Okay? And then you can use accidentals within the measure to override the key sequences. Okay, so C has no sharps or flats. If we look here, we see the different flat keys. So the first flat key is F, and that has one flat, and it's actually B. You know, remember, if this is G, then this line is B, and this line is B because it's the same thing, shifted down one line. And the key with 2 flats is B flat. The key with 3 flats is E flat. And then you can see there's this pattern that forms, and there's also a mnemonic. The way you remember the name of the key is, it's kind of a nesting thing. You have to remember that F starts with B flat. But then the key with 2 sharps is the n-1 flat, right? So if you've got 2, n-1 is 1, that's B flat, that's the key. The key is E flat, n-1 is E flat, you know, so it's there. That's how you name the key. That's a mnemonic to remember the name of the key. What it actually comes down to, like I said, if you build a major scale, starting on this note, these how many black keys, how many flats you end up. Okay. Similarly, we have sharp keys. So the key of G has 1 sharp, D has 2 sharp, A has 3. And the mnemonic you use here is you find the last sharp, and you look for, and you go 1/2 step above that, and that's your key. So this last sharp is G sharp, 1/2 step above that. This is the key of A. So in some sense, you know, these are mnemonics, so you don't have to do the memorization. If you were to sight read, you know this stuff. You know, and you have to know that every time I see, you know, if I'm on the key of B, there are 4 notes that I have to play sharp for every time. And that kind of makes sense from a more oral perspective, which again is not how I came out of it, how somebody who started with music and then learned theory would know it. You know, if you do it by ear first, a lot of stuff makes sense. Okay, big thing that a lot of people use is circle of fifths. Okay, so this is another way of looking at, if we look at here, the sharp key signatures, C has no sharps and G, D, A, E, B. Well, I'm going to write that around the circle now. So C, G, D, A, E, B. Okay, and each of these is a fifth away. So if I go C to G, right, the integral, that's a fifth. If I go G to D, that's also a fifth. And we keep going, we can keep going around like D to A is a fifth. So this is another way of remembering the keys. That every time you move to another position on the circle, you add a sharp when you go this direction, and when you go this way, you add a flat. And then you see that the key of, you know, 7 flats is C flat, and 7 sharps is C sharp, and they line up with the enharmonics actually match up. So you know, you could say these keys are kind of equivalent, but they're notated completely differently. So they have the same notes. Like the key of B has the same 12, or excuse me, the same 7 frequencies as the key of C flat, but they're notated completely differently. Okay, so if you were to do just like a spectral analysis on the major scale, you can tell the difference. But if you were to look at it in sheet music, it'd look completely different. Okay, so far we've been talking about major scale, which I've heard different things. Usually people describe major as more of the happy scale. Richard Lloyd, who was the lead guitar, or one of the lead guitars for television, the band who played that clip up before, he has an excellent description of music theory as it applies to guitars on his website.